¿Qué pasó, güey? It's your homeboy Quetzalcoatl hitting you up with another one. This video will cover the life and death of former 3-division world champion Alexis Arguello, the fighter known as El Flaco Explosivo, a fighter who is considered by many as one of the best boxers of all time, and is undoubtedly the best fighter that Nicaragua has ever produced. Please join me as I present to you the story of Alexis Arguello. Alexis Arguello was born on April 19th, 1952 in Managua, Nicaragua. The nickname he used in the ring was El Flaco Explosivo. Arguello would make his professional debut in 1968 and was the type of fighter who suffered losses early in his career but became a better fighter after those losses. Such a loss came in his first world title fight, as he fought longtime world champion Ernesto Marcel on February 16, 1974, for the WBA World Featherweight title in Panama City, Panama. Marcel would go on to win a unanimous decision, and Arguello was not able to avenge this loss, as Marcel retired shortly after this fight. This was somewhat of a setback for Arguello, but he was able to win his first title in his next championship fight versus one of Mexico's greatest fighters in Rubén Olivares. This fight took place on November 23, 1974 in Inglewood, California, and was for the WBA World Featherweight title. This was a great fight and is personally one of my favorite fights of that era. Both boxers put on very good performances early in this fight, but as the fight got into the later rounds, Olivares began slowly breaking down, and Arguello was able to capture a 13th round knockout as he dropped Olivares twice in that round en route to the victory. Arguello would go on and fight 16 more times at featherweight, and on January 28, 1978, he moved up in weight and fought Alfredo Escalera for the WBC Super Featherweight title in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Escalera was dropped in the second round, and this proved to be another great fight for Arguello, who captured the victory by 13th round TKO as the fight was stopped on cuts. Alexis Arguello would go on to defend this title in victories over notable names such as Mexico's Rafael Bazooka Limon, stopping Limon in the 11th round by TKO. He also engaged in another epic battle versus Mexican warrior Bobby Chacon. Bobby Chacon gave it everything he had, but Arguello's power proved to be too much, as he stopped Chacon in the 7th round by TKO. Arguello also racked up another victory at this weight division when he beat Ruben Castillo by 11th round TKO. On June 20th, 1981, he beat Jim Watt by 15th round unanimous decision to win the WBC lightweight title, and he was now a 3-division world champion. One of the notable victories that Arguello had at this weight was when he defended the belt versus Ray Boom Boom Mancini. In the same fashion as Bobby Chacon, Ray Boom Boom Mancini gave it everything he had, but Arguello overwhelmed Mancini and stopped him in the 14th round by TKO. Then, on November 12, 1982, Alexis Arguello attempted to be the first man in history to win 4 world titles as he faced Aaron Pryor for the WBA World Light Welterweight title in Miami, Florida. This proved to be another epic battle in Alexis Arguello's resume, and like the fight with Olivares, this is also one of my favorite fights of this era. As great as this fight was, it was also marred in controversy. Listen closely, as prior to the beginning of the 14th round, Aaron Pryor's trainer, Panama Lewis, can be heard specifically asking for a mixed bottle in the corner.
Give me another bottle. The one I mix. Okay? Come on. Come on. Gotta win these 2 rounds, champ. All right, wait a minute.
Now, Panama Lewis is not a bartender, so what exactly he was mixing into that water bottle is unknown. At that time, only water was allowed to be administered in the corner during a fight. Nowadays, certain sanctioning bodies such as the WBO allow for drinks with electrolytes such as Gatorade to be given to a fighter between rounds. But at that time, it was water and water only. What exactly was in that water bottle remains a mystery to this day. What is not a mystery is that Panama Lewis was in fact later caught cheating with another fighter, Louis Resto, as it was found that Resto's gloves had much of their padding removed, and both Resto and Panama Lewis were banned from boxing for life. Louis Resto would later admit that those responsible for the missing padding were in fact Panama Lewis and his assistant trainers. Resto also admitted that Lewis had put plaster in his wraps for his fights, as well as administered asthma pills in the corner, which would expand a fighter's lung capacity and give them a second wind. This is not a direct accusation against Aaron Pryor, who is considered by many, as well as myself, as one of the greatest 140-pound fighters of all time. This is merely an observation that needs to be made, and it is up to the viewer himself to draw his own conclusions. After Pryor was given this mystery drink, he appeared rejuvenated and went on to destroy Alexis Arguello in the 14th round. During this time, Arguello's home country of Nicaragua was embroiled in a civil war between the Contras and the Sandinistas. As you will later see in a video that I have provided, the Sandinistas, who were in power at that time, relished in the defeat of Alexis Arguello, who was basically seen as an enemy of the state as he supported the Contra movement. It should also be noted that Pryor gave Arguello a rematch and destroyed him once again. After the two losses to Pryor, Arguello attempted comebacks with some success and retired for good in 1995. What you will now see is a video of how Alexis Arguello became involved in politics after his retirement and how this led to his untimely death. Again, I do not claim to own this video. I merely intend to use this for educational purposes so that people who don't know about Alexis Arguello can see what type of man he was in and out of the ring and the events that led to his death. Enjoy.
Good evening and welcome to Real Sports, where the three stories we're presenting tonight share the common threads of death and boxing. Ours are not, however, tales of death in the ring, far from it. The roots of our lineup stretch back to last July, a month marked by the unrelated deaths of three former boxing champions. In what can only be called a tragic coincidence, former champions Alexis Arguello, Arturo Gatti, and Vernon Forrest all suffered violent deaths during just a 4-week span. By further coincidence, all three left a variety of unanswered questions regarding motives and states of mind that are still being debated by the families and friends of the former champions. The first to go was Alexis Arguello. Though slight of build, Arguello, back in the 70s and 80s, was a famously fearsome puncher and a hero in his war-torn country of Nicaragua. Only after he left the ring did his personal problems take him down a road that he was ill-equipped to navigate. Frank DeFord details his story in this Real Sports, Sports Illustrated profile.
1981, the year that Alexis Arguello became the most celebrated man in Nicaragua. An anxious and unstable young man had found his glory in the ring, winning 3 world championships.
Champion of the world, Alexis Arguello!
And an anxious and unstable country had found something, finally, to cheer about. The Civil War was in full bloom. The U.S.-backed Contras against the Soviet-backed Sandinistas, fighting for the control of tiny Nicaragua, one of the battlegrounds where the Cold War had gone hot.
Oh, a tremendous straight right hand by Alexis Arguello.
Amidst it all, there was really only one thing every Nicaraguan could agree on: their handsome and charismatic 29-year-old campeon. Arguello's own manager, Eduardo Roman, remembers.
One day he fought in Japan.
Japan?
Yes. The time where he was fighting in Japan were 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning in Nicaragua. Everybody was awake, in Managua at least, and I think in all Nicaragua. And after the fight, they started with fireworks and everything.
Fireworks at 4:30, 5:30 in the morning?
In the morning, yes. Nobody slept that day.
This might have been the story of how one young man helped bring peace to his country, helped bridge the two sides of a civil war, perhaps if it were fiction. Instead, this is the story of how a divided nation and the men who would do anything to rule it helped to destroy their favorite son. The Sandinista Party, communist eventually backed by the Soviet Union, took over Nicaragua at the height of Arguello's fame. Arguello had casually supported the old regime, and so he was branded an enemy of the state by the new regime and its leader, the power-hungry Daniel Ortega. Ortega confiscated everything Arguello had fought and bled for: his houses, his cars, even his dog. A.J. Arguello is Alexis's oldest son. You were with your father when he learned that he'd lost everything?
Yeah. We were all, in Mexico. We got a phone call, and, he was devastated, and it was all gone.
Arguello was driven into exile, landing in Miami, where he made the best of the situation, where he continued to dominate his opponents in the ring, earning the nickname El Flaco Explosivo, the explosive thin man. Boxing afforded him the Miami high life, with all the women and drugs that championship purses could buy. But he still always longed to go home, longed to see the Sandinistas overthrown.
Maybe when it's finished the problem in my country, I go back to live there with my family. But for now, I'm going to be in the United States.
Did he express the real hatred that he had for Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas at that time?
I know that he had a hatred for them just because of, everything that they did to us, everything that they did to our family. And I think that's what drove him to go to war.
In 1982, Arguello enlisted in the U.S.-backed Contras, the rebel army that was dedicated to toppling Daniel Ortega.
I remember going to an Army-Navy store in Miami. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm going to Nicaragua. I'm going to go fight in the war. And he bought, fatigues and boots and knives and all these things. And then one day he was like, look, I'll be back. He saw some friends die. He shot guns. He doesn't know if he killed anybody, but
he was in a firefight.
Yeah, and he said it was obviously a tense situation, and it was just something that wasn't for him. And he realized that he didn't belong there.
It's not cut out to be a guerrilla.
Exactly.
A few months later, Arguello was back in a more familiar battlefield, the boxing ring, to take on Aaron Pryor in the fight of his life. A chance to become the first person in history to win 4 titles.
This fight is being televised back to Nicaragua. So although he is in exile, he is still a great hero in his country.
To the people, but not the government.
There's a right hand. Pryor is hurt.
The fight was typical Arguello, furious and bloody, but it didn't work out how he'd hoped.
A smashing right hand. Arguello's helpless against the ropes. Arguello's hands at his side. It's over. Arguello slips to the canvas.
Back in Nicaragua, the official Sandinista press seemed to relish the defeat of the former Contra fighter. The Sandinistas wouldn't be gloating for long, however. By the end of the decade, they were on the ropes as well, driven out of power. Arguello, by now retired from boxing, returned home to try to reclaim his old possessions and his old life. But he failed miserably, getting hooked on cocaine, blowing all his money, and becoming deeply depressed, even suicidal. Meantime, Daniel Ortega was plotting a return of his own, and in 2003 he made his move, approaching perhaps the one man popular enough to help him win back the presidency, and desperate enough to agree to do it. Soon, Ortega and Arguello, the old nemesis, were face to face.
It has been described several times about what kind of encounter they do have.
Carlos Fernando Chamorro is Nicaragua's leading political journalist.
He basically said to Alexis, we have made errors with you, we have caused you harm in the past, and I want to ask you for your pardon. And Alexis said, well, if this powerful man is behaving in a very humble way to me, well, he deserved my pardon, and he deserved my friendship.
As simple as that, even though nothing of substance was given him, just the apology. We're sorry. We've still got all your stuff. We've still got your house and your boat and your dog and everything else, but we're sorry.
Yeah.
And that was good enough for him.
That's Alexis. That was Alexis' heart.
He saw it as a vehicle to kind of help him.
He was desperate.
Yeah. He had gotten to the desperate point. You know, he was an addict, and, you know, he needed to get out of that hole that he was in somehow.
And they were the only game.
And they were the ones who were there, you know, to reach out and help. And they promised him that with their help, he would help the country and try to help the people that were in dire needs.
And just like that, the country's two most famous men were a team. By 2006, it was all going as planned for Daniel Ortega. After 16 years out of power, he was back, re-elected president once again. Quickly, he put up billboards of himself everywhere, which led many people here to suspect that he was returning to his authoritarian roots. Then 2 years after he regained the presidency, Ortega was looking to solidify his control over the country by having someone that he could manipulate become mayor of Managua, the second most important job in the nation. And that's when he turned to Arguello, loyal to a fault, and asked him to be his man in Managua.
Soy Alexis Arguello. Votá para mejorar tu vida.
Almost no one thought that Arguello, a simple man with a third-grade education, was capable of being mayor. But Ortega thought he could win. On election night, however, it looked like it wasn't going to happen, which is when the Ortega-controlled Electoral Commission stepped in and simply declared Arguello the winner. Rioting in the streets followed for days, but in the end, Ortega got what Ortega wanted.
It was very evident when Alexis assumed the city of Managua as mayor that he was not in full control. There was another individual named Fidel Moreno who was the one who was running the city, not Alexis. Alexis knew that. Alexis knew that.
Did everybody in the country and in Managua know that too?
It was quite obvious.
He never really had the power. It was just a matter of him being a puppet for them. There was always someone whispering in his ear, telling him what to say. He got to see how corrupt the government was and how everybody is out to line their pockets.
It was right in his face.
Right. Now it was a reality, and he was part of it.
And I was very angry about those people manipulating Alexis and transforming and contaminating the idol into this, politician, into this corrupt politician.
But it only got worse for Arguello. In June of last year, he left the country for the weekend. When he returned, he learned that Ortega's men had reorganized the mayor's office in his absence, stripping him of the little power he had ever had. So, in effect, Alexis was a ceremonial head.
Which he already was.
Yes.
But it's not the same thing to know about that, but it's different to see it in an operational chart and say, well, this is me. Okay. So I don't have any power. No, I don't have any power. That's what he saw.
Arguello had been humiliated for all to see, nearly 30 years to the day after he'd had everything taken from him, and by the same men. Powerless, his pride destroyed, the old champion told friends he'd resign the very next morning. Fearing they were about to lose their party's most popular figure, Ortega's Sandinistas sprung into action.
What happened in the last hours? We know a few facts. He had already taken a decision to resign the day after. He was under deep depression, and that night he had a visit from Francisco Lopez, number 2 under President Ortega. What Lopez told Alexis that night, we don't know, but we know, and it all indicates that Lopez put pressure on Alexis not to resign.
Was he depressed then, Carla?
Yes. He was not himself. He was very sad. He didn't want anything. He wasn't hungry. He couldn't sleep.
Carla Riso was Arguello's 4th wife. When she got up to tend to the couple's crying baby later that night, Arguello took out his gun.
I saw that Alexis was getting the gun out, and I said to him, "What are you doing with that?" He was totally, like, miles away. He seemed very sad and totally lost. The housekeeper and I pleaded with him. We said, "You believe in God. Think about your children. The baby's very young. Don't do it."
Carla says she had no idea how to deal with the situation, so she went to get the guards stationed outside the house. That left Gladys, the housekeeper, to watch over Alexis. But Carla only made it a few steps down the stairs.
I think Alexis hurt her feet on the steps. Maybe he didn't want to shoot himself in front of her. When he looked around and she wasn't there, he picked up the gun, held it with both hands, and shot himself in the chest. A single shot.
When I got back here to the bedroom, he was already face down on the floor, full of blood.
There was one other person who saw Arguello in his final hours. The man sent by the Sandinistas apparently to tell Arguello that he could not resign, that he could not save face. That man was Ortega's right hand, Chico Lopez.
On the evening that you went to see him, why did you happen to go there?
That was one of the hundreds of meetings that we had, that we shared as brothers and friends.
There was a chart that took away even more of his powers, and evidently this led to his determination to resign. Were you aware that he was going to resign?
This is what the enemies of the Sandinistas are saying, the enemies of the strongest party in the history of Nicaragua.
I'm not talking about the enemies. I'm talking about the friends of Alexis Arguello, who he told that he wanted to resign. Are you aware of that?
I think we should concentrate more during this interview on Alexis's qualities, which I strongly respect.
But after several more futile attempts to obtain a straight answer, we concluded the conversation. The Sandinistas take no responsibility for what became of Alexis Arguello, but many here blame them. Some even suspect that the suicide was really a state-sponsored execution. Either way, Arguello's son points the finger at Ortega's men.
I don't believe or would ever believe that my dad would take his own life. But, I mean, if it was the case, then I think he was just devastated with the fact that, you know, everything that he thought was true was nothing but a huge lie. And if that's what you know, let him do that, if he did, then it was probably just a betrayal. Giving these people one more try, and then they just did the same thing all over again.
The funeral lasted 8 hours, the procession going through every neighborhood in Managua, past the home where Arguello grew up and the gym where he learned to fight, and finally to the National Cathedral.
The funeral became a very well-organized mobilization of the Sandinista front, where probably you had more red and black banners from the party than blue and white Nicaraguan banners. But I think people would have liked for Alexis to have a funeral, a non-political funeral, and they could not have that.
They were draping my dad's casket with the red and black flag, and I told them, don't you dare. I told them, take that thing off. You know, this isn't a political stage for you guys to, you know, claim that he was a Sandinista and he was going to be buried a Sandinista. So I took the flag and crumpled it up, because this isn't about him being a Sandinista. He's a Nicaraguan, and that's it.
Did Ortega come to the funeral himself?
He went to the Mass, and during the Mass, I couldn't take my eyes off, because I was so angry, and I wanted to kind of let him know that I was. So I was giving him the stare of death, you know, like, kind of like when, you know, my dad would look across the ring at an opponent, you know. I was kind of like eyeballing him, and I wanted to let him know that, you know, that no one was happy with what was going on, and that somehow we all knew that they had a hand in it.
How do you think he'll be remembered in his homeland in Nicaragua?
Just as a great man, a champion, and probably a martyr. He died for the wrong reasons.
Arguello's death comes as another in a long list of sad stories in boxing. After his death, many questions have arisen as to what truly happened the night that Alexis Arguello died. One such question is, why did Alexis Arguello's face and body have cuts and bruises when his autopsy was done, if it is claimed that he committed suicide by shooting himself in the chest? Those who performed the autopsy overlooked these injuries and concentrated only on his gunshot wound. Why did Chico Lopez, Daniel Ortega's right-hand man, refuse to answer if he was aware that Alexis Arguello told family and friends that he was going to resign, and dismissed them as lies and avoided the question completely? Why was his wife Carla, who claims to have seen Arguello kill himself, seen smiling and together with Daniel Ortega at Arguello's funeral, when Ortega is the man who is responsible for politically and personally ruining Arguello's life? Ortega was the man who robbed Arguello of his material possessions, which drove Arguello into depression and drug use. Then he turned Arguello into a political puppet, further humiliating the former champion. Why would you choose to be seen with a man like that at Arguello's funeral, rather than with the rest of Arguello's family? In my heart, like with Arturo Gatti, I truly feel that Arguello's death was not a suicide, but a murder. Regardless of what truly happened, may Alexis Arguello rest in peace, and thank you for watching.